President Ronald Reagan, right, and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev exchanged pens during the signing ceremony for the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in the White House on December 8, 1987. Bob Daugherty AP, by Elbridge Colby October 23 at 11:56 AM Elbridge Colby is the director of the defense program at the Center for a New American Security. He served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development from 2017 to 2018. The Trump administration has announced that it plans to withdraw from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty of 1987. This treaty banned the United States and Russia from possessing any ground-launched ballistic and cruise missile systems with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers, 300 to 3,400 miles. The administration's decision is sure to elicit a cacophony of criticism, but the truth is that the United States should no longer tolerate the INF status quo. The reasons basically boil down to two. Russia appears unwilling to give up the systems that violate INF, meaning INF is essentially a dead letter, and, more important, the United States no longer benefits from a ban on ground-based intermediate-range systems, but because of China, not Russia. This is not to downplay the importance of INF. The treaty played a major role in enabling and locking in the diminution of tensions that ended the Cold War. In particular, it eliminated all of the Soviet Union's SS-20 intermediate-range missiles, which posed a particularly pressing threat to NATO's defenses in the 1970s and 1980s. This was all well and to the good. But today is another day. Russia is no longer abiding by the treaty, and Moscow gives no indication of being open to coming back into compliance. The treaty has therefore become a one-way arrangement. The United States is abiding by it, but Russia is not. This would not by itself be a compelling argument for withdrawal, because the United States does not require INF-restricted systems for effective deterrence and defense in Europe, and staying in the treaty highlights Russia's perfidy. The United States and its NATO allies must take steps to improve their defense posture against Russia, but non-compliant systems are not necessary to do this. Since the Russian threat is more modest in scale than the Soviet one was, the United States could meet the need by investing in better penetrating Stryker aircraft and munitions, sea and undersea-launched missiles, improved ground-based fires, more resilient basing, better logistics, more effective and affordable air and missile defense, and the like. Rather, the most compelling reason for withdrawal is that the United States could materially improve the military balance against China and East Asia by developing and deploying INF non-compliant systems. China poses a much larger and more sophisticated long-term military threat than Russia, and U.S. strike options are more constrained by the geography of the Pacific. Washington would benefit from having the ability to deploy survivable land-based ballistic and cruise missile systems to provide a larger, more diverse and resilient greater strike capability in the event of a conflict in the Western Pacific. The United States is currently complying with the treaty unilaterally and suffering for it, albeit in a different theater. It was worth spending several years trying to bring Russia back in compliance, but that course has clearly failed. Now is as good a time as any to adapt our arms control architecture to our strategic needs. Many will argue that leaving the INF Treaty is tantamount to tearing down the late Cold War arms control architecture, thus bringing the world to the nuclear brink. But such statements are gross exaggerations. First, INF did not need to be a disarmament treaty. Most arms control treaties involve ceilings rather than bans, as well as transparency and inspections. There is nothing inherently destabilizing about INF systems. In reality, it was likely that then-Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev simply wanted to reduce the economic burden imposed by the Soviet military, and getting rid of INF systems was a convenient way to do that. Second, if anyone should be calling for withdrawal, it should be the disarmament community. For those who look at arms control as a useful strategic tool, but not a panacea, violations are important but not existential, because resting a nation's security on arms control would be foolhardy in the first place. It is disarmers who argue that we should put our faith in treaties, but if there is no consequence for violating them, what hope is there for disarmament? All that this means, however, is that there is a middle course open. Russia clearly believes it needs INF systems, and the United States could benefit from them in Asia. A revised INF that regionalized the treaty and replaced the ban with ceilings and transparency measures, as the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty does with strategic systems, is therefore a natural area of potential agreement. Ending up there could make sense for all parties.